Hello and welcome, everyone. You are listening to Recruiting EQ, episode number 94, which we have titled How to Choose the Right Retained Firm, with our special guest, Sue Hendrickson. Sue, how are you?
I'm great. Thanks for having me, Rick. Appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for coming on. Super happy to have you on. Sue and I had a couple of great conversations just about a lot of things, about what's going on out there in executive search, in being a founder and starting your own company, in what's happened with major companies. We covered a lot of ground, and I'm excited to get into it today.
Thanks. Appreciate it. And thanks for having me. And I look forward to, this conversation. I've been excited to have it with you and with everyone.
Yeah, thanks, Sue. Okay, so before we get too heavy into the actual topic of how to choose the right firm, I would love it if you could give the listeners a bit of just an overview of who you are, what you do,
Sure.
and start from there.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks. So my career was not a straight line. I would describe it more as a circular collection of experiences, but touching on some really, cool opportunities and working with some great companies that really help shape how I think about talent, how I think about, leadership and what great leadership looks like. I really started my career really early on, and I'm not going to bore you all with a bunch of details, but started with a boutique executive search firm and just really a great mentor, sort of right out of college. Uh, Fell into it, and he was an ex Kimberly Clark talent executive, so he's really strong, basic foundation and best in class practices and principles. And so I learned a lot about just the executive search process back in the day when we got on the phone a lot and, really talked to people and rolled up our sleeves and got in there. One of my clients I had worked with a lot at this firm was a larger bank and really enjoyed their talent team, their HR team, the leader of the group. And ultimately, long story short, joined them and went to the corporate side. And that was really purposeful. So I could see what the inner workings of a company was like. I thought it would be a great experience. I found it fabulous mentor and really helped shape how I think about talent, foundation and behavior, interviewing and communication styles, and a lot of great training. So I really checked that box, got a lot of what I wanted there. And that really started my career in corporate. So I spent the next, probably 2 to 8 years after Chicago, moved to Chicago, larger city, more sophisticated, just, really mind blowing for somebody that came from Wisconsin to DC. It was really great. And from there, really developed and progressed my career through human resources at a generalist, and then also really leveraged a lot of the executive search acquisition experience that I had. So it was a bit of a unicorn back then because I was really deep in search, how to source, kind of leading retained executive search from the corporate side. As I progressed, I realized that generalist route was purely what I wanted to do. So I went back to executive search, and I started with a mid-tier firm. One of my mentors worked with very closely, who was on the executive search side that I had actually hired in a couple of my corporate roles, said, "Hey, come work with us." So I joined a mid-tier firm. It was a little bit large firms. Ultimately, she actively mentored global executive search firms. And so she said, "You should think about this. I think you'd be a great fit here. I think this would be a great career move for you." And I joined a large firm. I spent the next progressive, 8 years of my career in this large global firm, and it was thrilling. I thought that the internal talent was incredible. I learned a lot about best-in-class practices, research, how large global firms operate, business development, execution, and just progressed through to a business development and more of a sales role in that firm. It was really important to understand how relationships are cultivated in these organizations, how searches are executed, the role of the lead partner, the role of the team, learning about great talent at the board level, at the CEO level. There were areas of specialization, and I gained very specific experiences working in very specific sectors, functions, et cetera. But I had an opportunity to sort of move around and see different things and work with different people. So it was really terrific, and I really got a great sense of what great leadership looks like. Leveraging from my corporate experience, how hiring decisions really impact business strategy, growth. Talent is just so important, and great leadership, understanding what that looks like and helping companies find it is really my passion.
Yeah, that's awesome. And it's an interesting
So
trajectory, right? To go from
from the large firm,
yeah,
yeah.
go for it. I think we have a bit of a lag, so I apologize to anyone
Oh,
listening, or
sorry, I
we
missed
might overlap on each other a bit, but there you go.
Yeah. So from there, dynamics changed at the large firm. A lot of the folks that I was close to and felt a real strong pull towards, and things just sort of changed. So I thought it would be a good time to explore a boutique. And I went to a boutique, and that's where really all of it comes into play. You're rolling up your sleeves, you're executing, you're doing business development, you're market sizing and market sensing and trying to find where the opportunities are. And, you're doing everything all at once. And you're also helping the others in the organization understand what great looks like and how to compete against the big firms and how to tailor your messaging. So it was a really great entrepreneurial experience, super hands-on, roll up the sleeves, and really valued, the change from a larger firm to a boutique. From there, I decided and was recruited to go back to corporate. And it was just really a special combination. It was a private equity backed opportunity with a SaaS-based consumer insights company that really melded some of my industry experience with my search experience, and really enjoyed kind of coming back to corporate and private equity. It's very strategic, very focused, very pragmatic. Things move super quickly,
I bet.
and staying on point. And we had a former McKinsey partner who was our CEO. And so there was a lot of elevation of data, metrics, strategy. So it was a really fabulous experience to work there. I was then recruited to Accenture, where I spent a number of years in a large global public company. And, hiring strategies at scale, I learned that. Incredible resources and recruitment marketing. The innovation that we were able to really drive there. I was a global talent leader for their digital practice, hiring managing directors. I had a global team, really getting your hands around the operations of that global team, offshore resources, leveraging automation. It was just really incredible. And DEI was a really important part: diversity, equity, inclusion, increasing our gender population, and the managing director population was really important. So we did some really super cool, creative social media campaigns, looking at driving communications to women in the workplace at the partner level and recruiting them over. So I could probably go on a whole nother podcast on that alone, because it was just so fun and invigorating. And, I was using technology with the recruitment marketing team that I hadn't touched or seen before. So that was all super fun. Driving RFP processes, the culture went from a really strong, move fast, let's get it done, to a balance of let's employ rigor, let's, really focus on business cases and preparing, the organization for this leader that's coming in, and let's integrate them. So it was just a really incredible, fabulous experience. At a point, I really missed kind of the pure executive search. There was a lot of reporting, there was a lot of metrics, a lot of data, a lot of that, kind of constant report out. And I missed relationships. I missed my client relationships. I missed the diversity of, starting a new project and working on something new. So I sort of took a flyer and bet on myself and launched my own search practice. And I did that in 2019. Took a couple of months to develop a business plan and start to look at my client base and outreach and things like that. And it was just really exciting. And I feel incredibly fortunate to be sitting here today to say 6 years later, we're still working at it. We're still doing it, and, help shape a team and bring in both contractors as well as, team that works with me kind of dedicated day to day. So that's, kind of the benefit of the last few decades of work.
That's amazing, Sue. And the thing is that it's such an interesting trajectory, because you've touched on kind of everything, like the small, the mid-size, the in-house, the giant, global, and then now being founder of your own firm. So you're just in a unique position to be able to speak on this topic today, of kind of like, if someone is looking to engage an executive search firm, like a retained search firm, where do they start? I mean, some people, I'm sure people have their biases or opinions,
Yeah.
but I'm curious to hear from you, having kind of done it all, right? And now having your own firm, what are some of the key things that you think clients should look at when they're looking to see what type of firm to engage?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. And I think you're right, because I've been on both sides of it. I've hired search firms, and I've also, executed across a lot of different size organizations. I think the first thing, and there are really four things, when you boil it down, four kind of categories, if you will, or frameworks that I suggest. The first is the person leading the search. You can look, and I'm working with the basis that people have an understanding of retained search. They may have used some search partners in the past. They may have networks within their own organization that are suggesting to them people that we've used in the past, people that we've met, maybe their own research on the website. So working from the basis that, maybe there's some groundwork there that's already been laid in terms of narrowing it down to, 3 or 4 firms. And, if we can talk more about how to get there, but I'm going to go from that basis. The person leading the search is probably the first element that I would look at, and their team. So really, you're hiring a team, an executive search team, and you really want to know that lead partner and how involved that lead partner is going to be in the search process.
Right.
And we can talk about, a Fortune 500 versus a PE portfolio company, 150 or 300 million. We can talk about that more later, because there may be some weighting of that involvement, but their judgment, their credibility, their track record in executing searches in the industry, the function, or the space that you are needing this support and external extension of your brand, your company, your team. I'll just kind of take a pause there.
Yeah,
Okay.
sure. I
Yep.
think that that's a really interesting starting point because I guess a lot of times when I have spoken to people who are choosing, where I guess this is when they've already narrowed down to their top four firms, or do you feel like a lot of people who have experience with firms are like, these are the four firms I know of, I'm just going to go to them? Like, do you feel like people are often doing like an exhaustive research of what firms are out there for options, or are they kind of going with what they know or have heard are the people to look at?
I would recommend both. And I would always recommend a competitive process. So, but I think, yes, people do tend to go with the person that they may know or that they've executed with in the past or that has led searches in the past. That's not always the right answer for
Mhm.
every situation. So I just, put um, maybe a flag up there for you to think about. Should we explore a different firm or a different path? And we can kind of get into that with a couple of these other areas, but I highly recommend a competitive process.
Yeah. And
Um,
then another thing you mentioned that I find interesting, Sue, is how much is that lead search or like lead search representative going to be involved? That lead search partner. Is this something that you've experienced in the past where you were really hiring a firm on based on the lead search partner and they weren't really involved in the search process and it kind of fell flat?
yes. And so I would recommend that you don't hire on logo, but
Mm,
you hire on specifically what you need from that lead search partner. And how are they going to, sometimes in large firms, the lead partner oversees the process, but doesn't necessarily get really involved because they can't, because that's just not how it's structured. And sometimes leading the process is enough,
mhm.
depending on how involved they are in setting the strategy, managing the team, managing the execution. So you want to, ask specific questions in your competitive process around how involved that person is going to be. Are they going to interview all of the candidates?
Right.
Are they going to tap into their own personal networks? Are they going to help the team set the search strategy and really guide that team, or is the team just going to run and then the partner checks in? So there have been instances where searches take turns or they evolve or the role changes, and the partner needs to stay the long course with the client. The team needs to stay the long course with the client. And sometimes um, in boutique firms, you have more of that dedicated, and it's partner dependent.
Sure.
No two search partners are the same. Um, Even if it's from a large firm, you, it can be very different in their approach
Yeah.
to the process.
That makes total sense. Thank you for that. Okay. So that's the first sort of pillar of four, correct?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Let's hit number two.
Number two, assessment capability. Um, does the person really and does the team really dig in and evaluate the leadership? Do they take a structured approach to the assessment? Are they trained in behavioral based interviewing? Are they driving situational examples? Coupled with, intuition, because if any of us have read Blink, we know that intuition is a collection of experiences that are really buried in our consciousness, right? And so their intuition is real and
Yeah.
it's scientific, but it has to be, and it's pattern recognition, right? So you need somebody who I think is strong both scientifically, the science part of interviewing and assessment,
Right.
as well as the art, which is, the intuition and the collection of experiences.
I love the intuition and the art piece. How do you so this is something that I think about, but then again, I came to recruitment very late in the game in my 30s, only after having dropped out of art school to start a record label and play in many bands and stuff like that over the years. So
That's cool.
naturally, and I like reading relational psychotherapy books for fun, right? So I'm interested in, the way that humans think and act, and like what is intuition really, and how does it play a part? Like, these are all things that I'm super fascinated by. Difficult to bring up in a conversation though with other with either vendors or other recruiters. How do you find that you broach those intangibles that are a little bit harder to measure or to identify, either when you're hiring for yourself or with clients? Like, how do you sort of try to get those intangibles down?
Yeah, well, I think first it's, you want a partner or you want a search team that is going to make a candidate feel very comfortable, very at ease.
Mm,
The enhancing the self-esteem, get them to tell stories, be non-judgmental, be a poker face and just be curious and take it in. And I think that's really, the art part is that relationship that you build with your candidate where they feel they can tell you the good because we all have good and we all have things that, we're stars at and strengths, but we also have blind spots
mhm.
and we also have areas where we've made mistakes. Have we learned from them? So it's getting them to tell these stories in a very natural, comfortable way and prompting them with, the right, well, tell me more about that. Oh, that's interesting. Oh, sometimes that happens to all of us. Tell me when that might have happened to you. And hopefully, I'm getting at what your question was, if that's where you were heading.
No, you totally are. You made me think of something else too, which is like, I personally, over years of interviewing people, I feel like one of my objectives is to try to get people out of, when I can see that they're in like interview mode, to try to get them out of that so that you can get a more authentic picture of what they really like and don't like, what really their strengths or weaknesses are. And so it's like,
Yeah,
I don't think it can be done directly. Right. If you can tell someone shows up and they're like in interview mode and whatever else, they're ready to tell you like a version of the story. I almost
right.
feel like I try to change the subject or talk about something personal or whatever else, until you can tell that like their body language changes and they've made a couple of jokes and they feel safe enough to sort of say things that are a bit negative or whatever, and kind of lean
Mhm.
into it. Because just asking, what are your strengths and weaknesses is, do
Right.
some
It's
very
the
few people
approach.
will be like, yeah, here's my, yeah, exactly. It's so on the nose, right? That a very rare person will be like, yeah, yeah, these are my strengths and weaknesses. I don't care. I'll tell you
I work
everything.
too hard.
Yeah,
I don't know when to quit.
I'm a perfectionist. I don't know if that counts. Like, the usual. Yeah. But yeah, like, is that kind of what you mean in terms of that
Yeah.
art?
Yeah, it's engagement, it's empathy, it's, being able to be relatable and, help them understand that, you've been in their shoes. But it's really about what happened. It's, what we call the STAR method. What's the situation? What did you do? What's the action? What's the result? But, getting that in a conversational, warm, engaging way.
Yeah, like bringing those things to life is hard. I think especially when people are beholden to like stats and metrics, and they are rushing and a bit panicked. I feel like the active listening and curiosity and empathy piece is quick to go out the window, I've noticed.
Yeah, for sure. Well, and sometimes I have clients that want to do a 30-minute interview, and it's really tough and to really kind of get granular in that. So, I encourage, everyone to do 45, at least to an hour, even for the first, conversation. So anyway, but we're sort of off topic there a little, but um, yeah, so I think that's really important. Assessment and
Yep,
engagement and likability is really, it's important.
for sure. And you also mentioned earlier too something that I think is important as well, which is like that the client feels like you can be an extension of their brand and represent them in these conversations, and like trust you, the person, to sort of, represent them like you're an extension of their team, and not just feel like, I'm hiring a logo. Here's a bunch of canned questions on a page. Just qualify if they can do this, this, this. Um, yeah, that
Yeah,
feels
exactly.
important
Right. I mean, table stakes, you want to check the boxes,
for sure.
right? But that can happen as well pretty easily. And in fact, I think the search firm, all those table stakes boxes should be checked by the search firm before the client meets them. So that's
Right.
also something to kind of put on the list. So as it relates to assessment capability. But the third pillar that I think about, and these pillars aren't set in stone, but culture fit and culture add.
Mm,
So you want to help your client, and this, goes to the extension of the brand as well, and the extension of their team and of the business segment that you're representing. Um, it's not just about helping them understand how this person's going to fit in the culture, but how over time they're going to add and benefit the culture.
right.
They're going to bring the organization to that next growth or to that next level of achievement. And you're hiring them, maybe for the job today, but are you also hiring them to impact and have a positive legacy on the company?
Yeah, I think that's huge. And I feel like you tell me if this is nuts, but I do feel like when it's a more difficult market or when there are challenges and things are complicated, I do feel like some clients can get pretty hung up on a picture in their mind that they have of what this candidate is going to be like. Not just their experience, but what they're going to be like culturally and whatever and how they're going to add. And I almost feel like it's the job of the person who's managing the account, like the partner or what, depending on your hierarchy, to sort of also gain the trust of the client enough to be like, we also see a lot of other cultures, and we think that this, can be complementary
Yeah,
to you or whatever. To have a dialogue, so that because sometimes that imaginary profile is the result of, I mean, sure, on the bad side, result of biases sometimes, but even if it's not overt bias, it's still just kind of like insular, like they're maybe not
for sure.
being
They're not
outside or
seeing
too
the whole
close to it.
picture.
Yeah.
Yeah. So anecdotally, just share a story. I was working with a client on a search, and we had, we had a great candidate slate. And there was a candidate that they knew of in the market. It was a sports sponsorship role, marketing. So, these people are very visible, very,
Yeah.
very out there. And myself and our team had probably a less than great experience with I think, ego that we were seeing with the individual, and knowing that our client had a very low ego culture, really consensus driven. There's no room for, big, dominant personalities in this particular, space or business. And just generally, it's not their culture. And they really wanted this name. They really wanted this like experience. And I frankly, kind of went to my trusted partner at the organization, my client, and I said, I'm just seeing things, they're flags for me. And
Yeah.
I need you to know it. Because it's contrary, I think, to these elements of your culture. And I'm not saying don't do it, but I'm saying let's go in eyes wide open. So ultimately, that person self selected out, which just sort of made sense at
Right.
the end of the day.
Yeah. Like they almost could tell that they wouldn't fit in with the culture at the end of the day, which
Yeah,
is which sounds like it was meant to be. Like it sounds like that's the right move for everyone.
right.
It's,
Right.
yeah, I love that story though because it really highlights. I mean, this show's called Recruiting EQ, so obviously I'm always kind of pushing the agenda of, I think that this era of where AI tools are coming in and people are very enthusiastic about them, and yes, they do wonderful things. I do feel there's a danger where people are trying to replace a lot of things that should be done by a human or talking about doing that. And I feel like it's a good opportunity to reevaluate what are the super important things that are human centric, like you mentioned too about the empathy and the active listening. You know what I mean? The emotional quotient of it all. But with culture fit, I feel like that's a big one, right? It's like you can want someone from that name till you're blue in the face, but
Right.
it's almost like saying it's less important to me who they are as a person than that they come from this name or this background. And that's a slippery slope, I
It
think.
can be.
Yeah.
It can be based on the culture of the company and how the person fits within that leadership profile and that leadership role and leading teams versus individual contributors. It can be really devastating to have a non-fit culturally.
Yeah. It's high stakes for sure, right? For the future of the business, short term or long term, even worse, long term.
Yeah.
Even worse, a bad hire that stays a long time and that isn't, you know what I mean? I would imagine.
I would imagine that as well for sure. But you really do, just to kind of wrap that thought up.
Yeah.
You really do want somebody that can take your company to where it's going,
Mhm.
and culturally take them on that, help them get to that point of where transformationally they want to be in the future.
Yeah. No, that's a great point. That's a great point. All right, let's hit number 4.
Number 4. Finally there. Level of service and execution. I mean, it sounds really basic and it kind of hits on that first, who's the lead partner and how involved are they? But are they going to give and it kind of wraps all of these things together. Are you going to get progress reports? Are you going to get somebody who is showing you the full market? Are you going to understand, does this search firm that I'm hiring have off limits in so many other companies that my candidate pool is going to be small versus really broad and deep? Are they going to be proactive with communication? Are they going to share some of these EQ, elements that we're talking about? And I could go on and on anecdotally with, EQ elements and watching candidates move through a process and, sort of mentally documenting that. Does the firm represent your brand? Does it reflect your company and your company's values in a positive way?
Right.
And then, are they managing the candidate and managing the project thoughtfully? So I think it really ties together all of the other, elements that we've been talking about.
It absolutely does. I think that's a great breakdown. And what about size of firm? Or there's two things that come to mind: size of firm and like the way that their hierarchy works, um, and how that can factor into a decision of whether to go with a firm that's got like a huge hierarchical structure, like a Shrek type firm, like a bigger firm, versus a boutique firm. But second half of that question is, what is your thought process on having someone local versus having someone global, like who has a local network versus someone who's like, oh, we can search anywhere? You know what I mean? Like, when do those factors become really important in your experience?
Yeah, it's really situational, and it's really cool to have these elements. Um, Complexity. If you're hopefully you're catching this, and I'm not today.
I think you're a bit frozen, but you're
Private
back now.
companies, public companies need. Oh, am I okay? So let me start over. And sorry about that.
No problem. It might be on my end. I
Sometimes
apologize.
large companies or large public companies would prefer a search firm. Am I good?
I think so.
Oh no. Am I good?
I think you are. Are you hearing me?
Yikes.
Oh, I think you're back now.
I'm good. Oh,
Yeah.
okay. Um, okay. Sorry about that. Larger
No, that's
companies,
fine.
sometimes can be matrixed, multiple stakeholders. A process can be, slower in a larger company. They may need a partner from a larger firm who has deeper resources, that understands how to navigate the complexities of a matrix organization with multiple stakeholders from multiple businesses that are um, involved in the search process, and that person needs to be involved across all of those cross-functional layers. And sometimes larger firms have, the resources, the experience, et cetera, to understand that and navigate it. Sometimes larger companies are okay with a slower process that's more rigorous, more process, more reporting. They require sometimes more metrics and more data. And sometimes larger firms can handle that just volume of
Yeah.
those other elements that are important, potentially better than a boutique. But I'm going to kind of go back to my original: no two partners at a firm are the same. And a lot of times, boutique partners, depending on their training and their team and their specialization, can handle that just fine. So it really kind of comes back down to weighting of what's more important to you and what's the right decision for this search. There are certain specializations, either boutique or large firms, like sciences, academia, healthcare, medical profession, maybe engineering. And if you've got a highly specialized like industry, like energy or oil and gas, and it's a very specialized role, you may want to go with a larger firm that has an industry specialization, or you might want to go with a boutique that's really all they do and they spend most of their time in that sector. So specialization can sometimes differentiate. It doesn't mean that the large firm is always the right choice, and it doesn't mean that it's not. So it's just really discerning what's important in that particular situation. Sometimes if you look at maybe a private equity firm,
Hmm.
$150 million portfolio company of a private equity firm, the dynamics are really different. And they don't need process. They need action. They need evaluation. They need somebody that can understand the investment thesis,
Hmm.
that gets, the elements of private equity, rolling up the sleeves, lean teams, moving fast, how well they engage with the leadership and the business. And I think also, understanding what is their work in the sector? What is this search firm's track record? How have they executed similar searches to what you're looking to do? What are their non-competes? What are their off limits? Really kind of understanding, does the search partner, does the search team understand the very specific requirements of the role in this industry sector? So it's very different dynamics. The weighting is very different. In private equity, speed can matter more,
Hmm.
process less, and that may lean towards a boutique.
See, that's really interesting because specifically the private equity and private equity portfolio companies market of like executive search seems to be thriving. Possibly because it's a really complicated market. Private equity seems much more mainstream, even to just talk about, or like almost every company I speak to under a certain size, that's their dream in life is to get private equity acquisition and, go to the Cayman Islands or something at some point. Like it feels like a very mainstream conversation, much more so than it was 10 years ago. Um, but it seems like it to what you're describing, it almost runs counter to what we picture of a traditional retained executive search that is slower moving, that is highly like full of data and research and informational and larger teams and kind of, the kind of Shrek firm picture that I
Yeah,
have in my mind of an executive search. Talking to people who are doing PE portcos like yourself, like you mentioned as well, it seems like it is more that mover shaker, like I don't care about a market map, just get me this CFO
right.
tomorrow or whatever kind of thing.
Yeah, but the interesting thing there is the process for the search firm is the same.
Right.
You you just don't wear your process on the sleeve,
True.
with because that'll just probably irritate the, the PE company. Like,
Yeah.
don't slow me down with all of this. Just get me. And I think it's less about, in my experience, it's less about, oh, let's have a structured weekly. I mean, you still want to do that from a best practice, but it's more like real time. If I see someone who I think is going to be great, I'm not going to wait, until we've got a 5-person slate candidate pool. I'm going to put this person in front of you. So speed and precision really matter. And you need a partner with private equity who can quickly align with your private equity client, your portfolio company client, around what great looks like, getting the access to the talent, and closing the candidates effectively. I mean, closing candidates goes across the board. It's just something that every search professional should be very strong at doing. But that speed element is really important.
Do you find, and this is maybe an offshoot conversation, but we haven't really touched on this much on this podcast for some reason yet, but closing candidates, closing high level candidates, C-level candidates, or what have you. You've probably seen that in various different kinds of capacities at your many jobs. What do you feel? What are your thoughts on best practices to closing or setting up for a close?
Getting the compensation elements and requirements discussed very early in the process, maybe a high level, maybe something like total direct compensation expectations. And we have, some regulations that, regulations across states about what you can and can ask. So, be mindful of the state that you're working in and what you can and can't ask. But getting that expectation and continuing to check that expectation at almost every conversation and opportunity that you have, and ensuring that the client is hearing those compensation expectations throughout the search process. So in our first presentation, compensation is part of that initial communication to the client. And sometimes things evolve, for candidates. Sometimes they get bonuses in the middle of, a search process, or
Totally.
sometimes they get a review. So that's why continuing to, have the conversation, has anything changed? Just simple follow on throughout that relationship. And, I think we're in the middle, right? And we're clearly needing to communicate our clients, framework to the candidate. And it's really important that you have a really good grasp on what that trajectory looks like and what some of those watchouts may be. A lot of work in tech, and we've seen a lot of tech, RSUs and PSUs and stock options really, evolve and change over the last couple of years. So I think it's really important to have a grasp, not just on, what it looks like today, but what that historical performance has been. And, that's part of the compensation closing element of it. But I think it's also, really just devoted communication, checking in all of the time. Every situation is a little bit different, but also understanding the flags. Like, is my candidate not getting back to me right away? Are they delaying the last round interview? And this is
Yeah.
where, that human element, the EQ versus AI, there are some things AI just don't have that blink conscious experience of.
True.
AI hasn't seen that movie before. They don't know when, hey, maybe it's time I need to jump back in here with this candidate, because maybe they have multiple offers that they didn't tell me about. But that's the other thing early on. What else are you looking at? What other opportunities are you interested in? What's going on internally at your company? Are you going to get a counteroffer? Are you going to accept that counteroffer? Under what circumstances would you accept a counteroffer? And then it's some of, sort of the basic things. Have we looked at the non-compete? How are we going to hire this person? What does that non-compete look like? What does a non-solicits look like? What are you prepared for a background check? Everything in order there, so you're right. I think we could spend a whole other hour just
That's
on
true.
closing.
Yeah, it's true. It's a really big thing. I feel like there's been a lot of attitudes that I've heard off this podcast that I've spoken to. Obviously, I speak to people about this often, right? And I consider myself very lucky that the two mentors that I have had in my trajectory of recruitment, Julie Robinson being the owner of Raymond George, being one of them, most recently, and the biggest one. But it's like this whole idea that you're active listening and then thinking what jobs you might pitch to the person, but almost like I'm not going to pitch them anything that I can't close them on, right? Like that I don't think if I think there's going to be a problem closing them on this job at the end, I'm going to work that into the pitch and say, here's my concern with this job for you right away.
Yes.
And and you know what I mean? And that active listening to like, what are the real problems, factors, emotionally that are going to make somebody want to change. So like in my head, I'm already picturing 10 moves down. If they actually like each other, what are the problems that are going to come up? How am I going to, close this person on it?
Yeah.
Money aside, let's assume we get in the right ballpark of money. Otherwise we wouldn't get to the final stage anyway. Right. And it kind of feels like that is like you're saying, it's hard to do in a 30-minute call,
Right.
right? Like you need to spend some time with people before you can really get even those true motivations before it even totally makes sense to pitch them because like how you're pitching them will
Right.
change if you knew the motivations, right? You'd pitch it differently or maybe choose not to pitch it at all if you didn't know the motivations. And again, that's a call that AI is not
Yeah.
going to be able to make.
And yeah, and it's knowing when to engage your client,
Yeah.
when to say, hey, you've got to spend more time with this person talking about these three areas because, they really need to understand this in order to, feel comfortable or, they have some outstanding questions and have breakfast, have lunch, have dinner, bring them into the fold, make them feel like they're already part of the team.
Yeah.
And all of that really, is sort of a situational of when I want to go to my client and say, hey, I need you to do this and this, or I think this would really help the closing if we had X meet with him who just relocated from Toronto and share that experience, so things like that.
I think that's a really good point that you bring up too about like adding a step even, which feels counterintuitive to the old adage of like time kills deals. But I've found post COVID, for a really great candidate, sometimes the close works when you add more steps, spend more time in different environments, bring them in, like you're saying, go out for dinner, bring them back to the office to meet with everybody, or like an event of some kind to really integrate them into the feeling of the place. That seems to help more than hurt when it's the right person, like when everybody is on the
Yeah.
same page, right? Obviously, not for everyone. You don't want to add steps to the process as a blanket rule. But
Right.
when it's going well, these days I find adding more contact and more FaceTime seems to help rather than hurt. And it's not a rush to get to the finish line, even once you know you've got the right person. Is that something you're seeing as well, or is it just kind of in my line of business?
No, I definitely. I mean, most definitely. I think in-person meetings are really important. I know there was a period of time where a lot of decisions were made via video, but I think that in-person element has definitely resurfaced and flying candidates in and spending time with them. And, you know, it gets back to, the white glove. How do I parlay how I think about white glove experience and candidate experience and the extension of your brand? All of those elements really kind of tie up and become a nice bouquet, at the close process.
Yeah, for sure. Um, Question for you on that too, on that front. I have had surprising answers to the counteroffer question from guests on this show, and you mentioned it in passing. What are your thoughts on counteroffers and the way that you've seen them play out in the past, like post COVID?
Yeah, typically not good. Not good. I mean, I think there are statistics out there, and I don't want to quote recent stats because they may have changed, but look at the statistics, and typically somebody who accepts a counteroffer is, leaves within the next, 18 months to 24 months anyway. And I think it's just really hard culturally to quit and then not be seen as somebody who quit.
Yeah. Right. It's it's pick any relationship analogy. It's tough, right? It's a hard thing to get over. And also there's the reality that in my entire time of being in recruitment, I have at least a couple times a month as a the client facing person gotten calls where it's like, oh, hang on, let me close my door. Okay, so confidential replacement. We just made a counter offer to this person. I need you to start replacing them. Not even because they're angry, but sometimes they're like, I'm afraid they're going to leave. It's a fear-based move. It's not always a revenge thing per se, but that's a reality that I don't think people are necessarily thinking when they're in the seat of getting the counter offer all the time. That it's like,
Right.
it may seem like a great idea, and they might be on the phone to another search firm to confidentially start replacing you the day that you accept it. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah. It's tough. It's tough.
Well, I thank you for all that. That is a lot of amazing information. You're in Chicago,
I'm in Chicago.
big city, similar size city to Toronto. I think are pretty much
Yes.
almost the same size and similar in a lot of ways. Um, Off the top of your head,
Yeah.
favorite restaurants in Chicago?
Oh my gosh. Holy
Great,
cow.
very diverse and great food scene. I will probably be visiting Chicago this year, so this is also selfish. Okay.
So many. Well, I love Le Colonial. I love
Yeah.
Vietnamese, French Vietnamese. I love Le Colonial. It's got a great vibe. It's downtown. I'm not a big steak eater, but my husband is, and he would say bavettes. So,
Oh, bad.
Chicago, I gotta throw in a steak joint, right?
Makes sense. Makes sense.
For Italian, and I'm probably not going to pronounce it right, I had a really great experience at Il Carifu. Oh, you're going to have to Google it. I think I just destroyed the pronunciation.
That's okay. What did you have there? That was so awesome.
Oh, we went with like 6 people. And I think we had like the whole left and right side of the menu. It was
That's awesome.
so awesome. And everything was good. Like everybody loved everything. I mean, they had a hamachi crudo, which was light and nice,
yeah.
which you don't always find in Italian. So there was something for everyone, carnivores and vegans alike. It was awesome. I really like, if you want old school red tablecloth, checkered, sort of
Yes.
mafia-ish
I do.
Italian, no reservations, La Scarola.
Oh yeah, Scarol. Let's do it.
Yeah, and if you want just vibey scenes, there's a lot of vibey scenes restaurants here too, like Sunda and Tsuko and Cindy's Rooftop for cocktails.
Cindy's Rooftop sounds good.
Yeah, the Aviator for specialty cocktails. Aviary. And there's a ton of fine dining. If you want to, just drop like lots of cash, you've got Alinea, you've got Next. So, it just depends.
I'm going to admit something that is a little embarrassing for me, who likes to eat out and who loves restaurants and who tries different restaurants everywhere I travel. I have not been to Chicago. I will be going for my first time probably later this year. That's the plan anyway, in a couple months. Is Chicago pizza truly better than New York pizza?
Oh my gosh, don't do this to me. I love Neapolitan pizza.
Yeah.
Neapolitan pizza is my favorite pizza. And like I could just name like 6 Neapolitan pizza places. I'm going to take a pass.
I know it's probably like the most controversial question I can ask you, aside from like, the Cubs. Go.
Yeah. I would say Super Bowl it's Chicago deep dish pizza. You know, if you got a big crowd over, you know. But again, I'm gonna like my husband's gonna be like, do the meat lovers, you know,
Yeah.
pepperoni, sausage, the whole thing. And I'm like, oh, can you stuff mine with spinach?
I'll do spinach and feta, thanks. Instead of, yeah, exactly. That's awesome. Well, thank you very much, Sue. This has been lovely. A lot of fantastic information there. If people would like to reach out to you, what is the best way that they should get in touch with you? LinkedIn,
Yeah,
website?
LinkedIn is great. My website is great, but you can find me on LinkedIn. Super easy, and all my contact information is there. And this was just really fun, and it was nice to spend time with you and all of your fans.
Well, yes, thank you. And we just got a comment now, actually, from somebody. Oh, someone. I can name her. It's okay. She's the owner of Raymond George. Julie says, nope, NYC all the way for pizza. Sorry. We got a hot debate here going. The phones are lighting up, everyone. No, I'm kidding.
I'm going to get a lot of heat from passing on that question.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm sorry to do that to you and put you on the spot. It's my fault, really. I owe you one. But yes, thank you very much for being here. Your website again is for Leadership Advisory Group, just for those who are listening.
Yeah.
Can you read that? Is that just leadershipadvisorygroup.com? Or?
Leadership Advisory Group LLC.com.
Awesome. Thanks, Sue. Much appreciated. And thank you all for joining us for another episode of Recruiting EQ. Feel free to check out both Sue and I via LinkedIn. The LinkedIns will be in the description if you're listening to this on Spotify or any other of our lovely podcast portals. Thanks very much, guys.
Awesome.
Thanks, Sue. See you next time.
Thanks a million. Have a great day, everybody.